Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, making some time to spend with us here at Florida PBIS. Today's chat is going to be all about the model school criteria for this school year, 25-26. And Nicole Fintel is going to walk us through all of that. And so I think you guys will really enjoy this. Here you go, Nicole.
Thank you, Betsy. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nicole. I'm the evaluation coordinator for the Florida PBIS project. And as Betsy mentioned, we're going to be talking today about the 25-26 Florida PBIS model school criteria and the application information for this current school year. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to kick off our discussion by providing a brief background on Florida PBIS model schools. I'm then going to share the prerequisites for applying for a 25-26 model school award. We'll go over the criteria for each of our 3 award levels. And then finally, I'm going to highlight some resources available to help schools and district coordinators plan for model school applications for this current school year. So a brief background on model schools. We've established this model school recognition system in our project back in the 2008-2009 school year. The goal of model schools is to celebrate schools with effective PBIS implementation who are also experiencing progress in improving student behavioral outcomes across Florida. The model school program encourages schools to continuously collect and use data to monitor their outcomes and their implementation of PBIS. To inform decision making. And as PBIS practices have evolved in Florida, we've always evolved our criteria for model school recognition as well. So each year we have reviewed and refined our criteria for model school awards to reflect the improvements and refinements of PBIS systems that we're observing across the state. And so that's why we always host a TA chat at the beginning of the year around this time to kind of go over what those criteria are and how we're going to be recognizing schools for the school year. And since the program's inception, we've had over 1,300 Florida schools that have been recognized for their implementation of PBIS. This past year in 24-25, that was 31% of the schools who are active with the Florida PBIS project met criteria and applied for an award, which represented 574 schools in Florida last year. And I mentioned earlier, there are some prerequisites for schools to be eligible to receive and apply for a Florida PBIS Model School Award. And so these are the prerequisites for the current school year. If you applied for an award last year, it'll look very similar. We haven't changed any prerequisites. The first is that a school must be active with our project, which means that they've been trained and they're recognized as being actively implementing PBIS through consistent data collection and submission. Schools must also submit for the current school year all of the required evaluation items that are outlined on this slide. This starts with the PBIS implementation checklist or PIC, which will open in our online evaluation system, PBSES, in just a couple weeks, October 15th, and it's going to be due on December 1st. So the PIC is our quick checklist to assess the degree of implementation across all 3 tiers of support for a school. It gives teams a sense of what's been done, what needs to be done across the PBIS implementation process. There are no minimum score requirements for the PIC to be eligible for an award. So we encourage the use of this tool to identify areas that your school needs to address early on in the school year and throughout the year so that you don't have any surprises at the end of the year when we do our more formal evaluations with the benchmarks of quality or BOQ, and then the tier 1 walkthrough, as well as the tiered fidelity inventory or the TFI for tiers 2 and 3. So all of that said, there are some minimum score requirements at the end of the year for those other implementation measures. Model schools have to score at least 60% on their tier 1 walkthrough. That is a tool that's completed by an external reviewer. So that's commonly the school's district coordinator, where they schedule a time to come into the school and complete the walkthrough instrument and provide some feedback on implementation. There is also a minimum score for the BOQ. For this year, schools must score at least 80% on the BOQ to be eligible to apply for an award. And the BOQ is that that team self-assessment of their Tier 1 implementation at the end of the year that I mentioned. So all of these minimum scores required indicate to us that your school is reporting a high level of implementation fidelity, especially at Tier 1 for the school year. We also require that schools submit the TFI at Tiers 2 and 3, but no minimum scores are tied to that particular measure. And then finally, schools are required to complete all portions of the Outcome Data Summary, or ODS, to be eligible for an award. The ODS is where schools can submit their attendance data as well as the number of referrals and suspensions that students received during the year. And it's disaggregated, those data are disaggregated by student race, ethnicity, and disability status. In addition to providing outcome data, schools will not be eligible for an award if they report extraordinarily high rates of referrals and suspensions during the school year. And I'm going to go through some of those specific criteria and what that means in just a minute. All right, so the final two prerequisites before schools can apply for a model school award relate to district support. So district coordinators must work with the Florida PBIS project annually to ensure that they have participated in a recent yearly implementation planning meeting, or a YIP, with our project. And this is just one criteria for ensuring that districts are continuing to receive support and are engaged with us. And then finally, each school must be recommended by their district coordinator to receive an award. So that opens up once we've determined basic levels of eligibility. And when the system opens up, the district coordinator can go in and provide their recommendations for their schools. And by making that recommendation, the district coordinators are agreeing that a particular school is implementing PBIS with fidelity and that they're experiencing those positive outcomes. Okay, so once a school has met all of those prerequisites, they'll be able to access our online application system. It's in PBSES, so that same place where you go to submit all of your evaluation data, there is a section for model schools. Schools can log in and submit their application, and that will be available starting June 18th through September 1st. All right, so that was a lot of information on one slide. So I'm going to kind of go through some of similar information just from a different kind of point of view. This is the timeline for the 25-26 Model School Award cycle, including when all of those various evaluation data will be available to submit throughout the school year. I mentioned this starts with the PBIS Implementation Checklist, or PIC. That's going to be open again October 15th, so that's coming up, and is due before December 1st. Starting in February, DCs will be able to coordinate with their schools to schedule and conduct that Tier 1 walkthrough. That can be entered starting February 1st through June 15th. And then finally, we'll have our end-year evaluation cycle where the BOQ, TFI, and then the outcome data summary can be entered online, and that's through June 15th. Once all of those data have been entered, our project will identify which schools met basic model school prerequisites, and will determine the award level for which each school is eligible to apply based on those data. The DC will then go through, make all of their recommendations for schools to apply, and then once those are received, schools will have access to submit their applications in PBSES. All right, this year we're going to again be recognizing schools across 3 award levels. Bronze awards, to meet a bronze award level, schools must meet all of the prerequisites that I mentioned. So that demonstrates Tier 1 implementation fidelity and relatively low discipline rates for students. For a silver award, schools must meet all of the same bronze criteria, as well as reporting no significant disproportionality for any student subgroup through their discipline outcomes. And finally, for a gold award, schools must meet all silver and bronze criteria, as well as demonstrate sustained Tier 1 implementation and positive outcomes for at least 2 years. So I'm going to go through now each of those different award levels and give a little bit more information about what that means. All right, I mentioned earlier in the last slide that bronze model schools must meet all of the prerequisites, as well as the big one is minimum BOQ scores, walkthrough scores, as well as low discipline rates. And the prerequisite that I highlighted here where we see probably the most questions is about the requirement related to the discipline rates. So schools will be ineligible if they report an office discipline referral or at a school suspension rate above 1.5 times the state median for their school type. We have a tip sheet in our Model School Live Binder. I've also linked here on the handouts that you can access in Live Binder, a tip sheet that provides some additional information about that criteria specifically, because we often receive a lot of questions about how the median rates are calculated, what they might look like, etc. We don't calculate those until after end-year evaluation cycle has closes and we have all of those outcome data for the school year. However, schools do have access to historical median rates for their school type within our school level outcome reports. So if you're just interested in how your rates compare to previous years or about where that median rate tends to hover, you can access that in your PBSES school level reports. And I've provided kind of a snippet here on how you can access those. The criteria for model schools, again, is 1.5 times that median rate. So while the value here from the reports, it shows you the median rate, you have to just do that extra calculation to look at model school criteria. So as part of your Tier 1 system, schools should be regularly reviewing their discipline data, looking at trends, and engaging in problem solving throughout the year related to their discipline rates. All right, I wanted to take 1 minute to explain one important update to how we calculate the discipline outcome rate criteria for schools who fall into our other school type category within the Florida PBIS database. So that tip sheet I mentioned, the outcome criteria tip sheet, I've updated that to provide some additional information about this particular change. But a little background in our system, we have other schools. Those include schools that have non-traditional grade combinations. So for example, K-8s, K-12 schools. Up until this year, we've always grouped those schools together when we compared their outcome data. But as you can imagine, a K-8 looks a little bit different from a 6 through 12 or a K through 12 program that serves schools across the full range of grades or different grade levels. So that did make us feel that comparisons could feel a little unfair when we were grouping all of those schools together. We also couldn't separate these schools out further to make more direct comparisons because there just aren't enough schools in each of those unique grade combination areas to be able to calculate a statewide stable median rate. So this year we're changing that. We're going to be introducing a new way to calculate expected discipline rates for our other schools that takes into account the actual grade levels that are being served. Instead of using one single comparison group, we're now going to weight the statewide median discipline rates for elementary, middle, and high schools based on each school's grade configuration. So for example, if you are a K-8 school, you are serving 6 elementary school grades and 3 middle school grades. So your expected rate for your discipline will actually be the elementary school median statewide multiplied by 6 grades, plus the middle school median multiplied by 3 grades, all divided by 9 total grades that you're serving. So that's going to give us kind of a blended expected rate that falls across the grade levels that you're being served and represents the actual makeup of your school. Again, we're going to be applying that same 1.5 times the expected rate criteria for model schools. So that for model schools, it would be 1.5 times that new expected rate calculation that we're going to come up with for your school. So what does this mean for you moving forward? It means that our criteria for other schools will now differ based on the grade levels that each unique school is serving. So a K-8 school will not be directly compared to a 6 through 12 or a K through 12 school. It also means that comparisons, I hope, will be fairer and more stable from year to year since they're based on that larger sample of elementary, middle, and high schools that we're working with. And it hopefully will give you a clearer picture of your school performance and because it is going to reflect your specific mix of schools. So we know that other schools can look very different from one another, and we're hoping that this update helps ensure that those differences are reflected in a fairer way with your data comparisons. Again, I've updated, this is probably our biggest change for model schools for the 25-26 school year, just for calculating that prerequisite for other school types. So if you have questions, please add them to the chat box. I'm happy to try to talk that through with you. And then I've also, and again, that model school outcome criteria FAQ resource has probably the same information I just went over here in a little bit more detail. So if you have any questions from your other schools, you should access that resource for more information. So I feel like I've been talking for a lot before I move forward with other bronze criteria and the silver and gold. Does anyone have any questions about that change? Okay, well, I'll keep looking at the chat box. Feel free to add any questions you have there. Okay, so this slide shows an example of what the model school application will look like for schools who are applying for a bronze model school award. Across all awards, the only application requirement is actually it's the same as last year. We're just asking that all schools provide some basic contact information for the applicant and their school. And then additionally, they'll have the option to share a resource or artifact or a short description of their PBIS practices. So these sections specific to the bronze application is completely optional for schools this year. So at the bronze level, schools can share, they can choose to share any resource that they think contributed to their high PBIS implementation and fidelity and their low discipline rates. So for example, their expectations matrix, reinforcement system, any data tools, lesson plans, flowcharts, alternatives to suspension. Those are some examples, but it's not limited to the types of resources that schools could choose to share. The upload here is optional again, but if schools do choose to submit an artifact or a resource, that resource might be selected to be featured by a project in the future. Moving forward, our silver model school award level, schools will be recognized at silver if they meet those same bronze requirements, while also reporting no student subgroup with a risk ratio for office discipline referral or out of school suspension that's greater than 2.5. If a school reports any risk ratio above this value, they'll still be eligible to apply for a bronze award. And we only calculate risk ratios for schools that have subgroups with at least 10 students who've experienced that outcome, because we know that risk ratios aren't always stable with really small groups of students. I've linked on this slide a link to our disproportionality live binder. So that includes a lot more resources that can help schools and districts problem solve specifically around disproportionality. And we also have our school level reports, a report on disaggregated outcomes that you can use to look at your school's historical risk ratio data. All right, similarly to bronze section of our application, the only requirement for silver will be logging into the system and providing contact information, and then they'll have the option to share a resource that showcases how they were able to reduce the use of disproportionate discipline practices or how they've engaged maybe partners, families. Examples could include, again, data tools they've used to examine their data and track their goals, examples of how schools are communicating and collaborating with families, or examples or how they're able to gather feedback from their students, parents, staff, or community members to inform their PBIS systems and implementation. And then finally, we arrive at our highest award recognition level for the 25-26 school year, which is the Gold Model School Award. To qualify for gold this year, schools must meet those same silver criteria and also demonstrate sustained implementation of PBIS for at least 2 years. In this context, sustained implementation means that in addition to meeting all of the model school prerequisites and criteria for the 25-26 school year, the school must have also shown and demonstrated positive implementation and outcomes during the previous 24-25 school year. So that means they must have reported a BOQ last year of at least 80%, that they've maintained ODR and OSS rates that are lower than 1.5 times the state median for their school type last year, as well as ensuring no student demographic subgroups have had risk ratios above 2.5. So these additional criteria for a gold award will be based on the 24-25 data that were submitted. And if a school is missing any of those data or did not meet those criteria in 24-25, the school will still be eligible to apply for a silver award. And again, this is what the application will look like for gold model schools this year. In addition to providing that contact information, they can provide optionally a resource artifact or description of how they were able to demonstrate sustained Tier 1 PBIS implementation and those positive outcomes over multiple years. So examples could be your school's handbook, lesson plans, data tracking tools, or action plans. Finally, I wanted to share just an update about model school recognition for this year. For 25-26, again, we're going to be pausing our recognition at the gold level while we continue to take time to review and revise additional criteria for advanced tiers implementation that have been in the past part of our platinum model school application level. So this pause doesn't mean that higher levels of implementation aren't being recognized. It's just giving us some space to encourage or to ensure that our advanced tiers recognition really captures the full depth of PBIS implementation across all 3 tiers. Our current recognition system of bronze through gold already reflects a full framework measure. We are meaning that for gold model schools must demonstrate strong Tier 1 foundations, as well as those required fidelity checks across all 3 tiers. But in the future, we will probably introduce some additional recognition specifically related to tiers 2 and 3. So what does this mean? Even though we're not going to have a platinum recognition for this current school year, we still want our schools to keep building and refining those systems at tiers 2 and 3. This will position you in a really nice a nice spot. So when we do reintroduce advanced tiers recognition in the future. And I've included some resources here that you can explore to continue that development. It includes our live binders at tiers 2 and 3, which are filled with a lot of tools, templates, and examples of implementation at the advanced tiers. I still kept past application for model schools. When we had the platinum level, I've kept that in our live binder so you can look at what those application items look like and what those criteria were for tiers 2 and 3. So you can see how those pieces all fit together. We offered a tier 2 coaching series last year where you can find the links here to view those recordings. And if you're looking for more statewide opportunities for virtual trainings, formal virtual trainings at tiers 2 and 3, we will be updating our website in the coming weeks to show all of those opportunities and options for tiers 2 and 3 on our virtual training page. Finally, district coordinators, if you have schools who have questions or want to plan for professional learning around tiers 2 and 3, you can reach out to your Florida PBIS contact and we can help you map out next steps and connect you with the right teams and right supports. So just a note on tier 2 and 3 recognition, while we won't have a platinum or specific advanced level recognition this year, this is still a chance this year for schools to deepen their multi-tiered systems to be ready for opportunities in the future. Okay, so that was my presentation on the specific award levels, criteria, prerequisites for model schools. The last section of my chat I was going to use to review all of the resources that we have available for schools and districts to help support the 25-26 model school applications. If you have any specific questions about the prerequisites or criteria that I've reviewed, please you can unmute and let me know or add your questions to the chat before I move on to resources. All right, I don't see any questions coming through, but I'll keep checking back and I'll just move on for our resources to support your applications. And the first place that I encourage you to check out, if you haven't already, is the Model Schools Live Finder. That's highlighted on this slide. You can access that by selecting the Evaluation in Model Schools link from our flpbis.org homepage. And at the bottom, before you log into PBSES, you can see our Live Binder shelf. And I've highlighted the fifth one there is going over the 25-26 Florida PBIS Model School overview and requirements. So that has that particular location has a lot of the resources I'm going to share with you. It includes the full evaluation timeline for the year, the detailed prerequisites and award level criteria. We have a practice form. It kind of has each of the award levels so that you can actually see what the application will look like and practice your responses ahead of time. Has that model school outcome criteria FAQ resource that I mentioned, as well as criteria tips for district coordinators who'd like more information about establishing district level criteria for enhancing model schools. For all award levels, schools are required to submit various evaluation measures to our project, and district coordinators play a very important role in providing information to schools about those requirements, as well as monitoring their data submissions for their district. So DCs can use the PBSES online evaluation system website to monitor data completion. So this shows what that page might look like from our data monitoring page. You'll see the full list of all of your schools that are active with PBIS, and then you'll see if and when they've submitted each of the required items. So I've highlighted in the red boxes, those are the specific items that are required for Model School Awards. The first one coming up again is the fall pick, which will be opening October 15th. So we'll be sending out instructions for the fall pick within the next day or two to our district coordinators to disseminate to your schools. And then once that opens up on October 15th, you can continue to use the monitoring page to make sure that all of your active schools have submitted their evaluation item. We also offer a series of briefs and videos in our evaluation system Live Binder that can guide schools and district coordinators on how to submit their data, more information about how to monitor data beyond what I just showed you, and how you can use your data reports for problem solving around your implementation. So most of those resources are available in our user support Live Binder, also accessed from the main page. It's the #1 Live Binder on that list. Is our user support Live Binder for PBSES. These are some resources you can find in that Live Binder. There are some for generally how to use our self-assessments to ensure accurate data submission and fidelity to those self-assessments. We have our user briefs for both schools and district coordinators on how to submit data, how to monitor data. And then again, we have some guides on how to use your school level data reports to monitor implementation, and the specific requirements that are related for model schools are in there as well. In addition to the PBSES user support Live Binder, we have binders for each of our evaluation cycles throughout the year. So that includes our mid and our end year evaluation cycles. And those will include additional information about the actual evaluation items for those cycles. So for example, we're going to have our mid-year PBSES evaluation opening up in October 15th. That will just include the PBIS implementation checklist. So you can access the actual checklist in our mid-year Live Binder, as well as any resources specific to the PIC. And then same way, we have our end year evaluations coming up at the end of the school year, where you can access in the end year Live Binder, those particular measures, what those look like, and resources around completing those. And then I'm going to wrap us up with just some final tips for schools and district coordinators who are preparing for model school recognition for the school year. The first is to implement PBIS, work with your PBIS team and school staff to make sure you're maintaining high fidelity to the PBIS system throughout the school year. Submit that fall pick, ensure that your pick is submitted again before December 1st. And then use the data from the pick and any other data from last year to make sure that you're monitoring and problem solving and addressing challenges that arise. We don't want it to be a surprise when you're at the end of the year completing your BOQ and your TFI and you're actually realizing that the implementation wasn't as high as you thought it was. Collaborate with your district coordinator so you can request support from your DC to tackle any gaps that you've identified with your team. You can use your evaluation data to identify specific components that you want to enhance. And think about scheduling your walkthrough even now. I know it seems a little bit early. It doesn't open until February, but you can talk with your district coordinator about scheduling that time to have someone come to your campus to complete a walkthrough next semester. You can do a mock walkthrough now, kind of practice what that will look like, to help ensure that you're prepared for that when it occurs next semester. And then start planning for your other end-of-year evaluations, reviewing the timeline, ensuring that you are meeting with your PBIS teams regularly, that you've set aside time at your April and your May meetings to complete the BOQ and the TFI together as a team, and to ensure that you know how to obtain the necessary outcome data for the ODS. So ensure that your data systems allow you to pool the core data, or those percentage of students who have 0 to 1, 2 to 5, and 6+ office discipline referrals, average daily attendance rates, total days of suspension, enrollment across your subgroups, as well as the count of students and the count of referrals and suspensions for each of those subgroups. Be proactive, ensure that you're, if you're interested in applying for an award, make sure that you communicate that with your district coordinator, ensure that you know what their expectations are for those district coordinator recommendations. And then finally, don't forget to submit your application when it opens in June through September 1st, and to get that application in early. Again, I mentioned it's a very quick application this year. Once you're eligible to apply, it'll probably be, a couple minutes to go in, submit your contact information, and then those optional uploads and descriptions. District coordinators also play a critical role in supporting our schools who are applying and preparing for a 25-26 recognition. District coordinators can request support from their Florida PBIS TA contact. So reach out to your contact if you want to plan any support to help schools address the implementation gaps or areas of concern that you've identified across your schools and implementation. Use PBSES to monitor and keep track of schools' evaluation data submissions, so that can ensure that schools are staying on track and meeting their deadlines. Right now, you can start by reviewing that fall pick and getting ready to send out the information to your schools on how to submit those. Plan regular coaching meetings, organize those with your school point of contacts to ensure that they stay on track of evaluation deadlines. And also, these are great for offering support around those areas that you've identified and those implementation gaps. You can help review data. You can support your schools in looking at their PIC data when they're submitted, and planning for any enhancements for their fidelity and their outcomes. Encourage, data-based problem solving and focusing on improving referrals and suspension rates, as well as reducing disproportionate outcomes among student subgroups. District coordinators can start thinking about scheduling those Tier 1 walkthroughs right now. You might want to create a schedule and a process for how those are going to be conducted and scheduled for next year. And I've included some link to a Tier 1 walkthrough guidance for district coordinators that can help plan for those. Set and communicate any district-specific criteria. These are not required, but some districts do choose to include additional criteria to receive their district coordinator recommendation. If you, as a district, are planning to do this, make sure you clearly communicate those criteria for your schools early in the school year, so it's not a surprise, and that schools can understand what is expected of them prior to that application opening. And finally, make sure you set aside time at the to help schools support with their end-year evaluation. Ensure that you help schools beat the deadlines and review the importance of accurate reporting. Ensure that you submit your recommendations in PBSES for any eligible schools when the application opens. So that was maybe extended overview of the model school criteria for the 25-26 school year. I want to thank you for joining us to learn more about model schools. We have one more TA chat that's going to be in April, and that's related to model schools specifically. That's the time where I'm going to actually pull up the online application and go through that process and answer any questions from your schools or districts. We also if we have any district coordinators on the call today, we're going to be offering our first open-ended evaluation office hours. Is coming up this Thursday, actually, October 9th. It's at 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's more of an informal drop-in session for district level staff to ask questions about anything related to evaluation. So that could include PBSES, the fall pick, or model schools. And if you'd like information about that, you can reach out to your TA contact and they'll send you the link. So thank you again for joining us today. We still have about 30 or 25 minutes early that I'm letting you off of this particular TA chat. But we'd appreciate if you could fill out our survey that Betsy just pulled up to let us know about if you received information that you were looking for by attending. And I'm also going to stay on the line. I can answer any questions you have about model schools.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everybody that's filling out our survey. We really appreciate it. And I'll check the chat for you and see if there's anything in there.
I do see a question just came about our window clings. So last year, the 24-25 school year, we're sending out window clings to all of our model schools. We have sent in the order. I think they're all printed. They are currently wrapping up in the shipments of those. And so when we receive that shipping information, I'm going to send those to our TAs to send them to the district coordinators so you can get a more specific date on when they'll be received. Where does a high school find their expected rate for ODR? In the outcome data summary FAQ resource, we'll give you more information about specifically that expected rate or the median rate for office discipline referrals and out of school suspensions. I can't give you what the median rate will be for the 25-26 school year because we don't have those data yet, but you can access within your school level outcome reports. There is a couple graphs in those reports that can show you how your school type compares to similar school types. So the one I've highlighted right here, these graphs are one example of where you'll see that. You'll see your rate of office discipline referrals during previous school years. And then this orange bar right here will represent what the median rate has been historically. They don't tend to fluctuate too much throughout from year to year. So if you use that particular median rate and kind of see how you fell last year or in previous years, that will give you an idea of what it will probably look like next year. So if you're a high school and you log in, you're going to see how high schools compare. If you're a district coordinator and you just want to know what those rates have been, you can reach out to your TA and we can send you like specific median rates for previous years. Any other questions? Betsy, are we getting responses to the evaluation survey?
Yes, let me go ahead and got lost in my many open files. Yes, the survey is looking good. Thank you guys for completing that, and I'll go ahead and close it out. Let me make sure that everyone's in there. Okay. All right, we're good, Nicole.
All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, we're going to go ahead and close out our TA chat today. We also recorded today's chat, so in the next couple days, we're going to be posting that into YouTube and linking that on our in our live binder. So if you had someone who wasn't able to attend. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.